Monday. So today we're actually going to step into part 2 of a 3-week series called Embracing Emotional Strength. So if you're just joining us and didn't catch last week's, I would encourage you to go back and watch last week, which was part 1 of this, where we specifically talked about emotional strength in our inner world. Today in part 2, we're going to talk about how we build on that and how this idea of this inner world strengthening actually helps us show up for others relationally. And then we're going to carry on next week into week 3, as we're going to talk about the idea of emotional strength and how that plays out every day with consistency, or aligned values, and resilient habits. Okay, so what's really exciting about today we are actually in the midst of this week 2 of this 3-week series. We're kicking off a 14-day challenge. So today's the day that we're going live with our Embracing Emotional Strength challenge. So you're already in the platform, so just head over to the library or to the homepage, and you'll actually find that challenge. Okay, click on it, open it. Today is day 1. If you are joining us in the future and you're not joining us on the day this is going live, that's okay. That means that you can still follow us through this 14-day challenge, go to the same place, and jump in and join us at your own pace when you're ready. All right, so one of the things I want to just talk about last week that kind of carries us into this conversation this week is this idea that the work that we're doing around embracing emotional strength is founded on the principles of emotional intelligence. So here's what we know from emotional intelligence. It's built on kind of 4 progressive sections in like this quadrant. So it starts with the idea of self-awareness. So the more we can have self-awareness, the more we can understand what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what's going on inside of us. That's the foundational part that leads us to the second quadrant, which is self-management. This is the place where we are able to self-regulate and self-manage. It's the place where we are able to not only understand what's going on inside of us, but have strategies and tools to be able to respond rather than react in the midst of it. Then there's this other set of quadrants. It's the first in that so would be other awareness. So even though we talked about self-awareness, right, and self-management, now we're talking about other awareness. Other awareness is this ability to recognize and understand that other people have emotions just like we do, that they got stuff going on inside of them just like we do. However, one of the insights in this is they might not think what we think or feel what we feel when we think it or when we feel it. So this insight and ability to recognize others have thoughts and feelings too. Others are going through experiences, and it may or may not be congruent with mine. It's also in that space of other awareness that we learn the skills like be able to read the room, to be able to recognize in people's verbals and nonverbals what might be going on for them. It's the place where we start to recognize and build empathy and compassion for other people. And then this fourth quadrant is all kind of building towards the fourth one, which is relational management. How do we take all the insights of self-awareness and self-management and other awareness and leverage that for relational management? Well, glad you asked, because that's where we're headed today. So first of all, I just want to note this. Emotional strength isn't just something we feel. It's actually something we practice. That's how we do the strength building of emotional strength. It's how you show up. It's how you speak up, and it's how you stay grounded with others every day. I want to talk about a client that I worked with recently. The client came in, and I remember him saying to me, he said, I've done the work to be self-aware, but I still fall apart when others get upset with me. I either avoid conflict or I overreact. It's like I lose myself in the moment. Now that statement that the client said to me, I think is really common. It's really familiar, I think, to so many of us. This idea that I'm actually pretty insightful about what's going on inside of me. Like I'm able to recognize what I'm feeling. I'm able to put a name to it. I'm able to kind of, be able to manage internally kind of that all by myself, with myself. But the moment we introduce another person, the moment that someone, when there's conflict or they get upset or something shows up in my relational dynamics with somebody, like it all goes out the window. It all falls apart. Have you ever had that happen to you? Like you feel like you're doing pretty good, like regulating yourself until like there's some kind of triggering event with somebody. There's a moment of conflict. There's a conversation that just goes horribly wrong. And before you know it, you're right back into that reactive place instead of the responsive place that maybe you started or that you hoped that you were able to maintain longer. So what was going on with this client? It wasn't so much that they needed more self-control, right? They were doing that work. It was really this idea of the relational strength is built on emotional clarity. Did you catch that? So, it wasn't just about self-control. It was about relational strength that is built on this idea of emotional clarity. So maybe just a little bit more on that. So this idea of emotional strength helps you hold both, two things at the same time. We call this an emotional co-occurrence. We're talking about our feelings, but this can happen in other ways. We hold two things. We hold something like connection, like I'm committed to be connecting with others. But then we also hold this other part of like integrity with ourselves. Sometimes that integrity requires us to be a little bit protective with ourselves so that we be connective with others. It kind of feels and sounds like a dichotomy, but it's actually a really important and fluid process for us to be able to hold both at the same time. And it's this idea of finding balance, right? It's the space where we are able to create healthier boundaries, have safer conversations, and lasting trust. So a key part of this relational health when it comes to emotional strength is boundaries. And so I just want to talk about that for a few moments. We could go on for weeks and weeks. Like maybe we should do a whole nother series. In fact, we will in the future. We're actually going to do a 14-day challenge. We're going to follow this with resources around boundaries because they're that important. But let me just give you a quick example about boundaries and some of the insight that goes with it. So first of all, the insight, a boundary is a wall. The intention of a boundary is not to necessarily keep us in or keep people out, but a boundary is a clear statement of what we need to stay honest, to stay steady, and to stay engaged with other people in our lives. Do you catch that? What you need to stay honest, steady, and engaged with other people. So emotional strength gives us the ability to pause instead of react, right? Our ability to slow down for a moment and kind of check in and know this kind of sequence of what am I feeling, why am I feeling it, and then getting to the part where we get to actually respond instead of react, which is I get to decide how I respond in this situation rather than my emotions being in charge and controlling me and them deciding for me how I'm going to react. Okay, so emotional strength helps us with that. Emotional strength also helps protect our peace without punishing or pushing other people. That's a big one. Our ability to stay calm, keep our peace, and without punishing or pushing other people. And then the boundary work in this idea of emotional strength helps us stay connected without collapsing under pressure. Collapsing is this idea of we might freeze or we might shut down, we might run away. We think about the fight or flight response, particularly when we're in conflict. Right? Our ability to stay connected without collapsing under pressure. Let me give you a couple examples of this. You might be able to use a boundary, a statement, something to the effect of I care about you and I need some space to think about this. It's a great boundary. Prefacing it with I care about you, you matter to me. And then the request for the boundary is I need some space to think about this, whatever that is, the context of the conversation. Or how about this one? I'm not shutting you out. I'm trying to stay grounded. Okay, so communicating, I'm not trying to shut down, or I'm not trying to put a wall up between us, or I'm not trying to create distance for distance sake. No. doing here is I am trying to stay grounded. I'm trying to stay present. I'm trying to be in this place in order to feel safe. That's why the need for the boundary. Okay, so let me give you kind of some, since it's Mindset Monday, some mindset shifts. So rather than the mindset of weakness might make something like, hey, I'm just trying to keep the peace. So maybe you accommodate, maybe you ignore, maybe you evade. Strength says, I'll stay with the clarity and care, even if it's uncomfortable. Right? Real strength is not about running away, shutting down. No, real strength is being able to stay in it and stay with it longer, even if in the midst of it, it's uncomfortable. DBT talks about this, the idea of like distress tolerance. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of speaking the truth in love rather than fear. What an incredible principle when it comes to being in a relationship with others, managing those relationships, setting boundaries with important people in our life, our ability to speak the truth in love rather than in fear. So here's what from EFT, emotionally focused therapy. We know that emotional safety is built when people name their emotions without shame or blame. And emotional safety is a significant foundation for our work with other people. It's like this ability to be able to say, hey, can I tell you how I really feel? Like what's really going on inside of me, how I'm really doing. Right? When we can get to that place, that the place where we can take the risk, the place where we can say, can I tell you how I really, and that's the key word there, really feel, right? Because it requires depth and honesty and transparency and vulnerability and authenticity and all the good stuff. Okay, it's emotional safety that allows us to do that. But the lack of emotional safety might lead us to a place where we're not going to be open. We're not going to be honest. We're not going to be transparent and real. We're going to hold stuff back. We're going to twist and turn stuff in a way that we're going to try to self-preserve or self-protect. And we find it's just not a healthy way for us to be in relationships. And it's back to this idea because often there's this experience of shame or blame. If I told you how I really felt, what was really going on, I feel like you wouldn't understand, you would shame me, or you would blame me, you would judge me in the midst of it. Right? So really important that we work towards emotional safety. And then the reality is avoiding hard truths, it does not keep peace, at least not forever. What it actually does is it creates distance. Think about it, right? If we got something that's really going on inside of us, our hiding it, shoving down, ignoring it is not really creating authentic connection, but rather creating distance. And so, but when we share with softness, with ownership, when we're able to set those boundaries, we are able to connect more deeply. All right, here's a couple examples of that. So saying something like, I feel hurt and I want us to understand each other better. Right? There's the honesty. I feel hurt. But then it's followed with a connecting statement, a statement of what John Gottman might call a bid for connection, which is the idea of, and I want us to understand each other better. Or how about this one? I'm afraid of losing you, and I don't want to pretend I'm not. Right? That honesty, I'm afraid of losing you. And then the continuation, and I don't want to pretend I'm not. Super vulnerable, isn't it? Both of these statements, I think it's important to note that they have an and right in the middle of it. Right? Something is said, something with honesty and transparency. And then there's the word and then it follows by some statement of attempt towards connection or investment in the relationship. Remember I mentioned this earlier, this ability to hold two things at the same time. I can feel this, I feel hurt, and I want us to better understand each other. I'm afraid of losing you, and I don't want to pretend I'm not. Emotional strength doesn't just tell the truth. It does so in a way that invites connection rather than protection. Okay, so I want to just give a couple practical things as we wrap up for today. So I want to take some key insights from the challenge we're actually kicking off today. So later in the challenge, this is going to be into week 2, where it talks about relational strength as a part of this bigger work. So it says emotional strength is not just about staying calm, it's about showing up aligned with your values, your words, and your decisions. So when emotions show up, first of all, we have to recognize that emotions are messengers. They're trying to tell us something. So when emotions show up, when they rise, ask yourself the following questions. What do I feel? Right? And try to be as specific as possible. What do I need? Give yourself an opportunity to be able to say, what is this feeling trying to tell me? So what might I need in response to this feeling showing up? And then this third question, like, what would it look like to respond from a place of strength? That's important. What would it look like for me to respond from a place of strength, right? This ability to be able to say, I'm going to hit the pause button. I'm going to walk through these questions, and then I'm going to remind myself that I get to decide, right? This is this management part of self, but also in connection and relationship with others. I get to decide how I'm going to respond. So what would it look like to respond from a place of strength? Here's a few things you can do to practice this week. You can pause before reacting, because ultimately we don't want to react. We want to respond. So pause, walk through these questions. What am I feeling? What do I need? What would it look like to respond in a place of strength? Okay, so pause before reacting. The second one, get clear on your emotions. So whether it's in that moment or maybe you need to circle back and do some like reflection, but get some clarity on your emotions. What was I feeling? What was going on inside of me? Why might that been happening? And then this last part is respond with truth and grace. When I mentioned speak the truth in love, right? There's place for both, right? I can speak the truth and I can do it in a loving and grace-filled and compassionate way. That boundaries don't have to be about pushing people away or punishing people, right? It's being able to protect myself and keep my peace while staying present, feeling safe, and being connected to others. Okay, so as we wrap up, just want to note maybe just where we're headed next week, talk about this challenge that we're kicking off today. So next week we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, this idea of actually the things like we've been talking about, things we're doing in the challenge, like actually living it out. Like what are the practical, daily, consistent, and courageous ways that we can practice emotional strength? So make sure you don't miss that. Again, that's going to be next Monday for our Mindset Monday episode. Okay, so a few things as takeaways. Remember today is the launch day of this new 14-day challenge. Get in the platform, find it, subscribe, sign up for it, and get started. So if you can join us today, awesome. If you are joining us on another day, it's all good. Don't worry, you can still consistently walk through 14 days in a row. Would encourage you when you get into that challenge, like there's a comment section that you can connect with us, you can ask questions, you can communicate with the community within the Live Well Coaching platform. And so I ask you to take advantage of that. All right, everybody, have an incredible week. Look forward to seeing your comments in the challenge, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks.